Good afternoon, Luang Por.
Good afternoon, Ajahn Sumedho.
So today is Wednesday, the 2nd of October, and I'd like to thank you first for taking the time to do another Q&A. Today I'd like to ask you some questions that have been forwarded to me, sent to me by different lay people that are a little bit all of the same vein and pertain to how to use the Dhamma to help inform choices one makes in daily life as lay people in terms of conventional reality of daily life. So one example is someone who's asking about having felt quite positive generally during their childhood, and then as they grow up and kind of learn a little bit more what the world is about and become less naive about how it functions and society and people's expectations, they find themselves sometimes a little bit at odds between what they feel is guiding them in their hearts in terms of Dhamma and what they feel they may need to do and to kind of conform with society, whether that's getting married and earning a lot of money and having a family and having children, going out and spending time with friends at entertainments of various kinds. How do they balance that, Luang Por? How do they allow the Dhamma to inform their lives, and how do they make choices in these matters?
Well, it's always recommended to simplify one's life because worldly life, especially at this time, is very complicated. And there's so many choices and temptations, expectations, ideas going through the air, through the media, and they do affect us. And as we grow older, what we choose to do in life changes. Like when we're teenagers, we no longer want to play with toys. Or, as we grow older than that, we get old, we no longer have the enthusiasm for parties or for things that the world, other people in the world, that your family or friends or other people seem to enjoy. So I recommend simplifying your life using the 5 sila or moral precepts as a guide for action and speech. Because there is a lot of pressure from society, from families to conform, to be a certain way. And this is where trust your wisdom, your awareness that this pressure is coming from your projections of the society or various important people in your life. The body changes as we grow older, and its interests and demands are changing according to age. It's just the changing nature of phenomena. All conditions are impermanent. So I recommend trusting yourself to use wisdom in your life. When you have more insight into Dhamma and you realize your true nature, you still have to live in the society as it is. I mean, a society can't be anything other than the way it is. So reflecting on this, the society I'm living in is like this. And I have a guideline for action and speech, what we call Vinaya, which I took on when I was 31. But at 90, I still try to operate within those limitations because they're harmless, and it's a way of living one's life, that you conform in a skillful way to the society you're identifying with. Be the witness. My real refuge is in being the witness to life rather than a judge of it or of myself in it. And the witness is not critical, it's just observing, it's the way it is. When you're working with other people and they may accuse you of things you haven't done, then that's a teaching for you to learn from, to witness the righteous indignation one can feel for feeling blamed for something you haven't done at all. So I found a lot of wisdom coming from that experience. So just being a witness to my own sense of righteousness and indignation and a sense of separate views and opinions that don't agree with others is like this. It's egotistical to think my view is the right view and they're all wrong and bad. Then we're making value judgments about ourselves or about other people. Or if we're thrown into the state of doubt, did I really make that mistake? Am I at fault? That's uncertainty. And that's a mental state that arises and ceases. So being the witness to mental states, you're no longer a mental state yourself, you're taking the stand in Dhamma, in absolute reality, and observing the world is the way it is. The people you live with, your family, your fellow workers are the way they are. And it's not that they have chosen to be the way they are, they just can't help it. That's the way they've been conditioned. And more you realize that the world is an illusion. It's not reality itself, it's just like a myth or a water wave in the wind. It's not to be taken seriously.
It's not uncommon, it seems like, with people who come to retreats or come to the monastery, that they feel like there's a discrepancy between absolute reality and conventional reality, and they find it difficult to bridge the gap.
Yeah, well, ultimate reality is peace. And conventional reality is not peaceful. So we like the idea of peace, it's an ideal, but on witnessing the world, your own mind and the world around you, you realize it's about noise and change, day and night, it's about time. The world is noisy and its very nature is not peaceful. So when we demand peace from the world, that's a good idea, but the world, it can only be the way it is. Wanting to have world peace is a very noble ideal and very desirable. But being a witness to the world rather than a member of the world, then you see that it has moments where it feels things are peaceful and quiet and pleasant and harmonious, but they cannot maintain that state because of the nature of change. All conditioned phenomena is impermanent. So its very nature is to change, and once it reaches a kind of peak of peacefulness and harmony, it can't sustain that as a permanent state to witness to. The only permanent peace is in awareness of the changing conditions that we experience through our senses. So peace is we want to be happy and we want to be peaceful. So our lives we want harmony and good friends and good weather and have interesting lifestyle and have good health. And these are all ideals that we would like to have, but they're not the way things are. The body is, from the day it's born until the day it dies, it's just its nature is to get older. And that isn't always peaceful. That changing, from innocent childhood to teenage and puberty and youth and middle age and old age isn't always a very pleasant experience, because the nature of the body is not going to obey your commands. Its very nature is to grow old, get sick, and die. So like the COVID pandemic that we experienced a few years ago, that's part of nature. And there's always been pandemics, and you understand the history of the world, of the European civilization or Chinese civilization. It's in Africa now. They have these diseases they're trying to cure, and once they find ways of curing these diseases, then there'll be more in the future, because that's the way the world is. It's about change. Old age, sickness, and death are the Devadutas, or the heavenly messengers that the Buddha said to reflect upon. So rather than the Devadutas are like a sick person, an old man or woman, a corpse, and then they're dealing with the fourth Devaduta is meditation, someone meditating on this, to meditate on old age, sickness, and death. And in monastic life, many of us have gone to autopsies to witness the actual human body being taken apart and looking at the internal organs of a dead person, in order to instruct ourselves, not to indulge in kind of demonic pleasure in it. It's not pleasant, but it does have a reaction on us when we're used to seeing bodies being healthy and beautiful. And that's how we like to look at beautiful people, not ugly ones or diseased ones. Why is that? Why? It takes a meditator or a wisdom faculty that humans have to witness the way it is, rather than try to make the world into what one wants, because it's just impossible. It's not possible for us to manipulate conditions to fulfill our wishes and desires.
In the light of what you're saying, would it be correct to say that when one looks at one's life, it can be as a monk or as a a layperson as well, and one notices this discrepancy between ultimate reality and conventional reality. How do I practice meditation in the morning, which is peaceful and centering, and then go to work and have to face difficult situations at work or pressure from the family? Is it the case then that it's more an adjustment of the view of we need to open up to it, to accept it the way it is, rather than...
Yeah, that's what I do. My life in the Sangha here at Amaravati is the way it is. And of course there's always problems in the Sangha.
Yes.
And, ideally Sangha is ideal of the fourth Devadutta, the meditator, the wise sage, witnessing the world. But, even an enlightened monk has to live until he or she grows older and dies. And growing old and death is a part of our life experience. And that still operates. Like in the scriptures, the Buddha got sick and died, and he didn't, when you read some of the stories in the scriptures about the things that Gautama the Buddha had to deal with, like demons and betrayals and blame and loss of loved ones and all that, it wasn't that he was indifferent and lived kind of purely in a state of bliss. Well, the world circled around him. He dealt with wisdom, with the changing conditions. And the sila, the moral precepts, are guidelines for action and speech. They're not absolute, but they help us to make decisions that we may not feel like making because of our personal character. So sila and generosity are, the foundation for a happy life in the world. So like generosity is called Dhamma, and that is, to be a generous, unselfish person, is a happier way to live than being obsessed with yourself and miserly and stingy and mean, because nobody likes those kind of people. Where a generous person is usually tends to be more happy, even if they're poor or sick or whatever, because that's joyful to be generous and not be selfish. And the moral precepts we need guidelines, because action and speech is how we make karma. And if we lie, use bad speech, and steal and murder things and murder people and live a life just based on following impulsive desires of the moment, that's a psychopath. You're just not leaning toward peace, happiness at all in any way in this life. So like Dhamma Sila is the very foundation for a happy life as a lay person. Then lay people practicing meditation, just becoming a samana, a monk or nun, doesn't mean that we get enlightened. It's just a way to live, a form to use for mindfulness. Some monks use it wisely, some don't. that's up to them. So I recommend, these are guidelines like Dana Sila Bhavana meditation, when we can be compulsive meditators, wanting to shut the world out. Don't bother me. I want to get my samadhi practice. And we can go off to caves, cabins in the woods to escape the noise and conflicts of city life or family life. But even then, there are things that are annoying, like in Thailand, the forest monasteries are quite noisy because Thai forests are noisy, and a lot of insect life and animal, bird cries and noise from the villages. And my attitude was, well, the world is noisy. That's its very nature. And nature is noisy. And to want silence from the world is an impossible demand. But you can find silence within. And that's what mindfulness, sati sampajanya, mindfulness and investigation. You realize that pure conscious awareness is silent. And it's a beautiful silence, not disturbed by noise of the world. It underlies the noise of the world. But when we just get caught up in the noise of the world or the noise of our minds, then we don't notice it. We're completely oblivious to it. Till it's pointed out that underneath all that noise and complicated conditions of the world, there's this simplicity of peace and silence that with wisdom and understanding we realize for ourselves. And that's called enlightenment.
So this doesn't mean that being enlightened means you don't get accused of anything anymore at work, and that people stop trying to pressure you to conform to what their views are of society, but it means you learn to embrace it in a different way. Is that correct?
Yeah, you get even more abused. You don't escape the world, you just no longer believe in it.
So that's where your advice about trusting awareness, trusting the silence really comes in.
Trusting the inner silence. It's pure, and it's the deathless, it's the unborn, uncreated, unconditioned. And if there was not the unborn, uncreated, undivided, unconditioned, there'd be no escape from the world, the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned. We'd just be stuck in the world and it's changing conditions for lifetimes. But because there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned, there is the escape. And this is quoting from the Nibbana Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya, this teaching, there is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned. This was my guideline for most of my monastic life, because when I first read that teaching, it impressed me. So I kept imagining, what is the unborn, uncreated, unformed, unconditioned? And because I always was so caught up in the born, the created, the formed, the conditioned as a personality, where I was conditioned by culture, by education, by my karma. I was constantly thinking and worrying and self-conscious and idealistic, very idealistic, and wanting people to understand, and when they didn't, feeling slighted or threatened, and just an endless war within myself. The noise was more from internal anxiety and fear than from the external experiences I had in life. But in my experience of life, I've been blamed for for things I haven't done, and even as a elder monk, been blamed for things I haven't done.
But that doesn't mean it doesn't make you feel upset, does it?
Well, it's upsetting, but you're aware that that's a reaction. It's, that's emotional.
But the reason I ask is because very often there's this idea that can be created about the practice that as we evolve, we become detached from this, therefore we don't feel these things anymore. But that's not accurate, is it?
That's very ideal.
So
was the Buddha upset when Devadatta tried to kill him? He was aware of it, and it feels like this. So you can't help the way you feel, but feelings are conditions that arise and cease according to other conditions, where awareness isn't a condition, it's the unconditioned, unborn, uncreated, unformed. And so that's the escape from the world. So, because this is a feeling experience, like being accused of something you haven't done or feeling betrayed by friends or loved ones is, an unpleasant experience, whether you're enlightened or not. But the unenlightened being gets lost in their anger and resentment and wants to seek revenge or gets depressed by it. But the wise sage realizes that that's the world, it's like this, and doesn't grasp it. So feelings arise, emotions, habitual emotional habits arise, just like any ordinary being, but you realize with wisdom that they are impermanent and not self. They're anicca, dukkha, anatta. And that's not just intellectual, that's knowing through insight, not through just scriptural quotes.
thank you very much for these reflections, Paul.
My pleasure.